straight to the kids.
Wow.
He said when he start writing, give him a second.
Wow. Fourth grade, Black History class. I started writing, I started reading a lot, and I started learning about our history in fourth and fifth grade. In my elementary school, we had a mandatory Black History class. It wasn't required for the district, but our school had it. And we had that for fourth grade. My teacher was Mrs. Mack. In fifth grade, my teacher was Mrs. Robinson. And we had to do Black History essays. And then that's when I started speaking publicly too, because there was a Black History contest. And I entered that. And I never shut up, right? But I never stopped talking. Yeah, I won. I won both years. And that's when I started writing. And then when I got to college, I wrote for the school newspaper. And then after college, I started writing random articles for different papers, right? Yeah. And then I finally wrote my first book, Psychoacademic Holocaust, as a reward for finishing that racist doctoral program I was in. Yeah, but I like to write. But you got to be disciplined to write, boy. You got to be. I'm surprised I finished this book. I don't know how I finished this book. You got to be very disciplined to write. Like authors who pump out a lot and they write themselves, they have to have ultimate discipline because there's so many distractions that take away your train of thought. You can never finish. So for my next book, I think I'm gonna wake up early in the morning, maybe sunrise to like 8 or 9, and like write 3 hours a day. You should start writing. You should start writing too. I should start writing books for children right now. Get into the habit of writing right now. Get published as a young person right now. And your mommies know they can call Dr. Umar, right? Yep. And I would do an introduction for your child's book. Okay? I'm promising y'all that, right?
All right. My second question is, what inspired you to write?
What inspired me to write? Probably our great ancestors who were writers. So Frederick Douglass, right? I'm related to Frederick Douglass on my father's side. And he was a writer. Frederick Douglass had his own newspaper. Okay, and he's such a great writer. Like Frederick Douglass's first book, Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, was published like 1845. And it went on to become an international bestseller. And that book was so well written that white people didn't believe Frederick Douglass wrote his own book. They said this was written by the white abolitionists to make it look like black people were really intelligent. And Frederick Douglass actually named himself in the book, which is something runaway slaves didn't do. Runaway enslaved Africans kept their identity a secret because the fugitive slave law could allow your slave master to pay somebody to find you and bring you back to slavery. So a lot of white people said, Frederick, why did you name yourself in your autobiography? You want to be captured? He said, if I didn't name myself, white people would not believe I wrote this book. So he risked his freedom to show that black people were just as intelligent as anybody else. And so Frederick Douglass inspired me. Marcus Garvey also had his own paper. He never wrote his own autobiography. Frederick Douglass wrote 3. Garvey never wrote his own autobiography, but he wrote a lot of articles in his newspaper. And so those 2 ancestors, more than the rest of them, really influenced me. But when I look at Amos Wilson, who's more of a modern ancestor, black psychologist, he's a hero of mine. He wrote all kinds of books. Okay, you look at, who else is, Dr. Carter G. Woodson, the father of Black History Month, very well written, right? So for me, I felt an obligation, even though I like to write, I felt an obligation from the ancestors to contribute to the intellectual heritage and scholarship of black people because so many of my heroes not only spoke, they wrote. And so I said, you're not only going to be a speaker, you're going to have to be a writer too. That's where that came from. But by the time you're my age, I want you to have written a lot more books than I did. You follow me? I should have more than 2 books.
How old are you?
Okay?
All right.
So I should have more than, you know what I mean? When you're my age, I want you to have a whole library. You got me? All right. You too, Caleb.
Okay.
Where the queen at with the, there was a queen with 2 books. There you go. Step on up. I ain't forget you on that question down there either.
Doc, she want to give you the other book. Her father the girl from Trenton.
Okay, okay.
That's what I was trying to get.
He wrote more than one?
7 or 8.
See that? Her father
But I have 2 in the publisher I gotta work with.
Her father wrote this book. His name was Jack Washington. He wrote this book, and he wrote this book. She said he wrote about 9 books, right? I only got 2. So you see, as black people, we come from a heritage of printed intellectual history and scholarship. This is what we do. The greatest library in human history was in Egypt, called Kemet, by our ancestors in Africa. And it was the Library of Alexandria. And it was burned to the ground. Who burned it to the ground? Was it Alexander the Great or Napoleon? I think it was Alexander the Great. He burned it to the ground. This library told us how the zodiacs was created, the astrology, the planets. It gave us the seasons. It gave us mastery of most of the plants, the herbs, the animals. That library had about 100,000 years of history in it, in knowledge. And the white man burned it to the ground. And the books that they didn't burn, the white philosophers, so-called, took those books back to Europe, translated them, and put their names on it. So they became authors over books that were written before they were born.
They're basically jealous.
They weren't jealous because the early white people actually valued and honored African people because we taught them. All the white philosophers learned in Africa, all of them. Plato, Aristotle, Epictetus, okay, who the psychologists hold up, all the white philosophers learned from us, and they did not hide it. They were proud to say, I was taught by the Africans. It wasn't until racism became a weapon of the white man in the 15th century, the 1400s, right before Christopher Columbus. That's when white people started saying black people were less than. They knew it was all a lie. They know we came to Europe and civilized them. Racism is a lie, but they had to create it in order to what? Condition black people to believe we were inferior and condition white people to believe that they were superior.
Control us.
Say that again.
Control us.
And control us. And the best weapon of control is the mind. The mind. That's why I'm opening up a school, because we got to change this. If you don't change the minds of black people, you don't change black people. Everything is done through the conduit of the mind. The mind must be liberated. The Honorable Marcus Garvey said, who gave us the red, black, and green flag, he said, don't take the kinks out of your hair. Take the kinks out of your mind. Dr. Carter G. Woodson, the father of Black History Month, who went to Harvard University, he said that it took him about 20 years after Harvard to undo all the self-hate that Harvard put in him. Arthur Schomburg, one of the first black men to systematically study black history in New York City, he was a Puerto Rican. But unlike many modern Puerto Ricans who hate their black blood, he was proud to be an African. And Arthur Schomburg said, history will replace what slavery took away. History will replace what slavery took away. When you take a man's memory from him, he's no different than an animal. Animals do not have a history of themselves. You understand? The average snake doesn't know the history of snakes. You understand? They don't know what snakes are supposed to do, what snakes have done. They live on what? Instinct, not experience. And black people are living on instinct and not experience. And the only way we're going to get us from instinct living to experience living, which is the living of the human being, is we have to re-taught what the white man stole. Schools integrated, right, in 1954. Yesterday was the anniversary of the first little black girl, Ruby Bridges, who was escorted to school by 4 federal marshals in New Orleans, Louisiana, right? Why did they integrate the schools? They did not integrate the schools because they wanted black kids to get a better education. They integrated the schools because they were afraid that the education that black kids were getting in the black community outpaced the education of the white students. See, we invented the gas mask. We invented the stoplight. We invented the cell phone. We invented the helicopter.
The car, peanut butter.
Exactly.
He invented about everything.
Very much so, right? Almost everything. So we didn't need it. White kids wasn't inventing the stuff we was inventing. So why are you integrating us for? For a better education when we was doing better without the white kids. It was to control and dumb down the education of black children. That was 1954. 20 years later, 1974, you got special ed. 10 years after that, you got ADHD. And now look at us now. It is an education for incarceration. The solution is we got to open up our own schools. And that's what Dr. Umar is doing, right? Even though half the Negroes want to beat me up for it. It's the only way to do it, and it's the only way to do it right. Independence. Remember that. Independence, Caleb. Whatever we need, we must do for ourselves. Do you understand?
Yes.
Not because we hate anybody. We don't hate nobody. We love all humans. But we have a responsibility to the black man and to the black woman. And whatever we need, we must do for ourselves so we can control it. If you don't have control, you don't have power. If you don't have control, you don't have power. And God put us on earth not to be servants to other people. You understand?
Yes.
But to be leaders of ourselves. And we can only do that with power and independence. Yes.
Is God real?
God is very much real. Remember now, everything that you can see come from something you can't see. You wearing clothes today, right? You chose in your mind what to wear, did you not? You're in this bookstore today because your parent chose in their mind to come here. And all of us exist in the world because God chose in her mind that we should exist. There is nothing you see that wasn't first conceived in mind. Everything, this food, these books, this art, everything you see is a product of the mind. So if everything we make came from our mind, that automatically means that everything in the universe came from a universal mind.
Who made God?
God was not made. God is self-created. God was always there. God is the beginning. God is the original essential impulse of the universe. That's why they say God is I am. I am is God at a resting state of ultimate potential. You are God in that you are a manifestation of divine consciousness. He is God. She is God. The baby's God. Everything's God because everything has the Ashe. The essential spiritual energy of God is in all creation. You're a manifestation of your mother and father. I'm a manifestation of my mother and father. All of us are manifestations of divine consciousness. You see, God always was, and God always will be. So then the question becomes, if black people were God's first people, right? If God always was, and God always will be, that also means that we always was, and we always will be. See, let me tell you something. The reason why people don't like black folks, there's 3 reasons why white people don't like us. There's 3 reasons why the Chinese and the Arabs and the East Indians and the Mexicans don't like us. 3. Number 1, we're the first people. We have the strongest DNA. The reason police want to kill us off is because we have the strongest DNA. We can reproduce ourselves in any woman. I can marry any woman and that baby will be black. White man cannot reproduce himself in any other woman. The white man can only reproduce himself in another with a white woman. Do you understand? If the white man has a baby with a black woman, that baby is black. So you have a natural genetic superiority over everybody. They hate you for that. Number 2, they hate you is because they know how great you used to be. They know who built the temples in Kemet. They know that. They know all the inventions. They know you invented the lights. They know that. And because they are aware of what you used to be, they are afraid of what you still can become. You understand? And the 3rd reason they don't like black folks is because they see everyday examples of our excellence and our brilliance, even in the face of oppression. See, when they look at a LeBron James, they look at a Serena Williams, they look at a Michael Jordan, they say, oh my God, if they can do that on a football field, imagine what they could do in a corporate boardroom. See, white folks know exactly what you can do. They know exactly who you are. And that's why they systematically create a whole society that seeks to sabotage everything we try to do. Right? But we are not afraid of them. And we are not afraid of racism. And we are not afraid of anything that they do because we know God gave us, the original man and woman, the African man and woman. We are first and we shall be last. God gave us the ability to overcome everything. You understand? So although we talk about racism, I don't talk to you about racism so you can be scared of it. I don't talk to you about racism so you can make excuses not to do your best. I talk to you about racism to say that you will beat that too. You will overcome that too. One day you will destroy racism too. Because guess what? The only people who can run this planet with justice and righteousness, the only people who can run this planet with justice and righteousness are Africans. The white man has no business being in charge of this planet. He's running it into hell. The white man was never intended to be a world leader. Never. The Chinese man can't run this planet with justice and righteousness. The only people who have ever led this earth without a military dictatorship has been the African. And we led it with righteousness and justice. So until the black man and woman go back to where we're supposed to be, this planet will continue to go in the direction that the white man is taking it. We are meant to be the leaders of the planet Earth. And God will not rest until we go back there. And God will not be happy with us until we take ourselves back. You understand? That's why in ancient Kemet, written on all the temples, it says, man, know thyself, know thyself. Why did the ancestors say know thyself? Because to know yourself is to know that you are a vessel of divine inspiration and liberation. You understand? God needs us to fulfill his grand design. Did you hear that, Caleb? God needs you, Caleb, in order to fulfill his design. God needs you in order to fulfill your design. If you don't do your best, God cannot do the rest. Did you hear that? If you don't do your best, God cannot do the rest. And that's why I tell both of you, always do your best, because only when you do your best do you allow God to come through you and do the rest. Ashe?
Ashe.
Ashe. Who I got to sign up next? Who this first one to, Queen?
Peace. Peace out.
Nasha.